his question was about having practices where you can focus on, or at least have a big emphasis on, raising the floor of a team, getting those players a little more up to speed and not feeling like it's a waste of time for
The
the
more
more
experienced
experienced
players.
players, which I do think a lot of college teams definitely probably struggle with, going back and forth of, we have a bunch of freshmen coming in, we want to teach them how to, in the 10 years ago it was how to throw a flick, now it's maybe, run the offense, and you have a lot of seniors, fifth years, who know how to run the offense, they're pretty good at all the skills, and they want to focus on like more nuanced
Right.
blah blah blah.
Yeah. So we have a few steps kind of outlined to answer this question. And the first one is establishing buy-in, right? So we need to know what timeline are you working with a little bit? Like how long do you have to practice, I suppose, before the end of the season? Um, but it's important to have buy-in not just from the younger folks, but the older folks to know that, or the more experienced folks to know that it's only a good thing if you're raising the floor. Plus, no matter what you're working on, everybody can get something out of it. Um, we call that stacking skills, um, and what that means is, in any basic drill you're doing, um, kids may be able to only focus on how to pivot off the sideline, off the trap sideline. But somebody like me who's super advanced, maybe I can,
Grandmaster.
yeah, I'm a grandmaster. Maybe I can focus on also delivering that throw with pace and speed to my target in, what we call the strike zone, above the waist and below the eyes. And I should be shouting out Bob Krier while we're describing these,
Yeah.
because this is the school of Bob. And another player, maybe Quinn, probably not Quinn because he's a worse thrower than both of us, but maybe Quinn can focus on what
That's
we
cold.
call what we call an inward turn, as like receiving the disc. So we don't need to go into all the skills, but the point is there are generally maybe more 5 to 10 skills that you can focus on in any drill. And if you're a new player, maybe you can only focus on one at a time, and that's totally fine. But someone with more experience, they can probably start stacking skills and focus on 2, 3, 4, or 5 of them at a time. So it's just really important that you get that buy-in, and everybody can appreciate that those skills are stackable.
Yeah. Yeah, just that was, especially when I saw Jacob's question, like that was one of the first things that came to mind, just because one, it just overall bothers me when, people think they're above doing like
Any
simple drills. And yeah, and I just thought, like, maybe you have to talk to those players individually that are a little bit better, and you can even like stroke their ego a little bit and be like, hey, look, we know you're really good, and like, but we're gonna have to do this drill for the overall betterment of the team. So like, if you could do it intensely and like try to get something out of it, that'd be great. Um, and then that kind of went hand in hand with the second point that I thought of when Jacob asked this question, which was, and again, like this was all basically just like from having practiced under Bob for a couple of years. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to take any credit for this. This was learned from going to Bob practice over and over again for Bird. But so get that buy-in, and then the second one was like, make sure that you do these reps like when you're doing them, maybe probably at the beginning of a practice, like super efficiently, and that you
And he
can,
uses the phrase high work rate.
right, high work rate. So like, a little thing we used to do is count down before every rep, 3, 2, 1 to skin, which I think it's those little things that um are very valuable, because especially when you're doing something that's more simple, like a simple pattern, uh, you should be able to get a bunch of reps in very quickly. And within 5 to 10 minutes, everyone should have gotten a bunch of touches. And then what's nice about that is one, you're just maximizing the overall reps that the new players are getting, and two, the older players, can feel like this isn't taking forever, like, oh, I'm getting bored, blah blah blah.
Yeah, and we call this part of practice the high structure. It's highly structured with low resistance. So you're just getting muscle memory reps in a very controlled setting, um, and building a mental model of what it feels like to have a successful rep. And another thing that you can s- coach into the older players is establish that they are all assistant coaches themselves, and that they should have ownership over the outcome of the team or where the team is at. So what that means is, um, and a more experienced player is probably going to be able to cheat the drill or more or less beat a younger player. They can make it super challenging. But if you're thinking about what the team is actually trying to work on, like if I am trying to work on an around break off of a sideline and my mark is just shading super, super far, no around, that's not super helpful. So adjust your mark to the level of your teammates, being assistant coach. So Kins, who's 6'4" with a who knows what kind of wingspan, and I'm here at 5'9" with probably like a 5'5" wingspan. It's not great, whatever it is. He may need to help me a little bit more by providing a little less resistance, so I can feel what it's like to succeed on um, what a successful around break feels like. And then as I get more comfortable with it, he can continue to be an assistant coach and start challenging more and more.
Yeah, that's really big. I noticed that a lot because there's always like a couple people on the team that like love to get a hand block in like a 4 line drill when like it's going like an open side flick under or something. Like something super obvious. Like there's always a couple people that love to just
Yeah.
like, and it like makes them feel good when like they know what is supposed to happen and they block it. Like I always think that's really funny. So yeah, like putting the thought into like how this should look and would look in a game, and then yeah, helping recreate
Yeah,
that in a
and
drill.
there should be time and a place for those more competitive settings too. Because so we'd start by saying we should be highly structured, with low resistance, and then move into less structure, so medium structure to low structure, and medium resistance to high resistance. So what that means is, start repping things with a little more competition, maybe a scripted start in a small sided game where you get to work on the concept that you're focusing on at that practice, with a little bit of challenge, but still like you get to repeat it a bunch of times. So the idea is continue to get that mental model drilled into those younger players' minds, but in a more malleable setting, so a less structured setting where they can sort of just they have to identify those patterns on the fly. And then finally, you probably do move into highly competitive. So we'd say high resistance, and more or less no structure, where we've hopefully repped it enough. So when you find this situation in a game, this concept in a game, it becomes more and more second nature to identify those and execute whatever you're trying to execute.
Yeah. And that I think I've noticed one thing I've noticed with just teams that I've been on is I think most of the time at practices, especially if you're having like a nighttime practice, I find it's better to just have one focus. I think like a problem is probably when teams try to focus on too many things because at a certain point you're just going to see diminishing returns and maybe you feel like you've covered something as a team
Yeah.
but you haven't really like gotten enough reps or
Yeah.
whatever thoughts at
Yeah.
it. And I think it's difficult because we just have so for all the things we want to accomplish as a team, it really can feel like there's limited time because it's not like we're a professional team that is spending all our days thinking about this. Like if I had it in my perfect world, like when we had a practice, we'd pretty much just be playing and maybe starting with a drill or one focus or whatever. And then if there's things that we want to talk about, it would be like its own separate event. Like, that's why like NFL teams have like a film time where they're going and watching film as a team and talking about things. And so like then there's a time where you exercise your mental, and then there's a time where you exercise physically. And I think that's an important distinction that will help the younger players, especially because the younger players, maybe for an older, more experienced player, you can take in a lot more. Like for a younger player, like don't overload them. I mean, really, they just need to play ultimate. Like
Yeah.
they just need to getting reps. But it's like you want them to work on one thing, like keep it at one thing, and then as best as they can, let them focus on that one thing during the scrimmage. Like I know for myself personally, like I'll try to have a focus on something that I'm working on, but it takes me a couple times to like be mindful enough to bring that focus into the game. And that's me, and that's like one thing. So if we've talked about 2 to 3 things at a practice that we're trying to do, I just would say the chances of like
Yeah.
doing them and really getting good focused reps on them are pretty low.
So moral of the story is be really good at one thing. If you can only be really good at one thing, that's okay. Don't try to conquer the world every practice.